Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. These trucks used to be known for performance and reliability. This truck recently has done none of those things. There's a 50-50 chance now that if I leave a stoplight, the engine will stall. And there's a 50-50 chance that it'll actually start after I turn it off. Now, there's a few problems in the engine bay. The spark plugs are 5 years old from what I can tell. It's been sitting for 3 years, so those might be old or damaged or whatever. The ignition system might have something wrong with it. I'm not sure, because I remember one of the points broke off and I replaced it. And I have numerous vacuum leaks. For example, there's one right here. The line that used to be on there is over here now. This is rubber. Rubber shouldn't sound like that. So, the goal for this week is to try and just repair, replace, and tune up everything I can in this. There's also a small valve tap, so if I want to, I'm going to tackle that as well, because I think it would be really nice just to get rid of that too. But I think I'm going to start with the vacuum leaks, because I already see one over there, and I know there's a few, so I'll start with those. The first few vacuum leaks are on the air filter. There is this line here where, well, that hole there where this line came off of. That one's not doing good. I also got a new line there too. And this line here isn't doing the best. It's old, it's kind of stuck in shape, and it hasn't returned from where it was sitting. So these two lines are going to get replaced. This one is still good. I don't know if this was replaced at some point recently, but it's still doing just fine, so regardless, that's good to see. So I'm going to start with these two, and I'll be back when that's done. The first two vacuum lines are replaced. This one is a little larger than the original one, which was this one. So these two clamps can't go back on. I'm going to keep these clamps though, because they're pretty cool. It's just that this one doesn't need it anymore because it's a lot stronger than this one was. More elasticity. And this line is also replaced. It's now going all the way up to this little device here, which whenever a vacuum is run through this, it opens up this little flap in here, which I don't actually know what that does. It looks like it pulls air through this, which just goes over like a heat shield for the exhaust. So really weird system. I still don't know what it does. I haven't been able to find out yet. And while the air filter is off, there's also this line right here, which I think could be replaced. So I'm just going to do a little look around, see if I can get it off, and if I can, then I'll replace that. I did manage to get this line off and replaced as well. The other one, it's just getting pretty hard because all of this stuff sits directly on top of the exhaust manifold. It's all of this rusted stuff down here. All of that. And all of these lines and gas, vacuums, all of that sits right on top. So it's a little dry rotted, some of it's just baked to the point where it's cracking. But now should hopefully run a little bit better because the other line was getting pretty frail. It's getting to the point where I can barely bend that. I can't even bend the middle section. These lines are almost impossible. This one is just a rock now, so I can't even bend that. But so far, those three lines have been replaced, and I don't think there's any other ones. I was going to replace this fuel line here because I noticed it had a crack in it. But a few days ago when I was going to town, it burst right before I left home. So that got replaced before I even went anywhere. So that's all fixed. And I already replaced that one a long time ago. Everything else is fine when it comes to fuel lines. And that's still soft. So that looks like it's all for vacuum lines. Oh yeah, and this line's also soft too. It's for the vacuum advance. I replaced that a while ago because it got a crack too. So I think the next thing I'm gonna do is replace the spark plugs because I know they're getting to be pretty dirty. So I'll be back when a few of them are out. All of the spark plugs are out, and I lined them up cylinder 1 through 4. You see there's a slight discoloration in between them all. Cylinder 1 and 4 are running rich, and 2 and 3 are getting pretty close to perfect. Which, I don't know why it's off by that much, because they're both coming in, like they're leaving just right here from each other, so it shouldn't be that different. But I don't know, maybe cylinder 1 and 4 just have less spark or hold less heat. I don't know. Anyway, I found some different spark plugs, brand new, in the box still. Some AC Delco ones, so hopefully these will work a little bit better than those were, so I'll be back when I get those in. All of the plugs are back in, and they don't fit all too well, but I think I'm going to run them for a few days just to see if there's any sort of difference. And if there is, then I might just search for new plugs of the old type, which I just put on the floor over there. I don't really have anywhere to put them for now. But I'm curious to see how it runs now, so I think I'm just going to pop you on the stand so I can go and start it. Okay, starting now. That is a substantial improvement. Before, when it was running cold, if I put my hand on the engine, it would shake my entire body, but right now it's running very evenly. Even back here it sounds good, because before it would sound like it had a gallop almost. But it's running. Yeah, it sounds very even. So maybe all it needed was new plugs. I don't know, but for now I am gonna put the air filter back on and just wait a day, I guess, see how everything acts. Then when I come back, I think I'm just going to do a little tune-up on the carburetor and anything else that needs to be done. Right after I finished the last clip, I was just playing around with the carburetor, seeing why it was idling so high, and it was that vacuum leak that I was supposed to patch up. I just didn't connect anything, so it was an even larger vacuum leak. So now I'm going to start it again, and we'll see the difference in how it runs. It's still running much more consistently than what it did before. So seems to run a little bit better, but like I said in the last clip, I am going to just let this run for a few days and let everything soak in so I can do correct changes to the carburetor, maybe even get new spark plugs, and eventually go through the ignition system and fix the valve tap. So, be back whenever I get back. It's been a few days since the last clip, and I drove this around a little bit, and the stutter still isn't fixed. It still behaves the same way. It's a little more gentle now when it does stutter, but it's still there nonetheless. So I am gonna pull all of the spark plugs so I can get an idea of if it's running rich or if it's running lean, and when I pull those out, I'll tune the carburetor accordingly. All of the spark plugs are out, 1 through 4 again, and it looks like they're running perfectly from the looks of it. Now would be a nice time to not be colorblind, but that looks like the right color to me, golden brown. So the carburetor is running right. So it's not that. So it must be something related to the ignition. So what I'm going to do to start off is I'm just going to pop off the cap and just make sure the points are gapped correctly. So I'm also going to put the spark plugs in. I'll be back when I get all that done. I have the distributor off, and I managed to get the cap off for the first time in my life. Or the rotor. So now I just have to check to make sure that these 2 points are gapped correctly. So to help me, I am using a handy little book, Shilton's Guide to the Datsun, and in it, right here, it has the point gap specification for my truck, PL521 from 1971. So I'm just going to go gap all of that, and I'll be back when I'm done. Both points are tuned up now. They're supposed to be 0.02 of an inch, and neither of them were that. This one was, I could barely get the feeler gauge in, and this one was just a little tight. And I tuned it up now, so it should be fine. They're both 0.02 of an inch. And I always found the dual setup weird for the points. Apparently, I think the top ones is for first and second gear, and this one kicks in when you're in third and fourth. I don't know what they do or what it's supposed to, but it's just a little weird setup, I find. Anyway, I'm going to put the cap back on. Oh yeah, and I cleaned up the rotor a little bit too. Just kind of ran over it for wire wheel. So I'll put this back together and see if it runs any better. Right for a start, so let's see if it actually runs any better or if it's just the same that it always was. 2 pumps on the carburetor. It sounds consistent, but that's because the choke is I don't know. I'll let it sit for a minute, wait for it to warm up, and then I'll do another little test with it. I drove this to town and back just to test if it was running any better, and it was running substantially better. Where it usually would stall if I go over a certain spot on the throttle, it didn't really jump as hard. It was still there, but it was much less than what it used to be. It was almost completely smooth. So freeing off the distributor helped quite a lot, but I did notice it is idling too high now. So I'm just going to bump that down and think of where to go from there. I've got it tuned up a little better. It now idles around 800. It doesn't do it well, but it does idle down to there. And I have a theory that maybe it is just the ignition system. Like there's something screwy with it, causing it to just not run right. So I think what I want to do is start frigging with the timing. Because right down there I can see there's a little plate. And I think what I'm going to start doing is just slowly turn it each way and see if it makes any sort of change to the idle. Because I've done pretty much everything I can with the carburetor. It's just not running any better. Because, like, the spark plugs, it's running with a good mixture now. It's idled down to as far as I can go. So, I do think it's some of the timing. So, I'm just going to start screwing with it and start the engine and just start moving it back and forth slightly. And if I find anything interesting, then I'll bring you back. It's running different from how it used to. I changed the timing. Those two marks there should be aligned before I touched it, but I either slowed it or advanced it a little bit, and it's running more consistent now. So I am just going to take this on a little test drive to see if that fixed any issue. So I'll be back when I'm done. I went on my little test drive and absolutely nothing changed. It still stuttered just as hard as it did before. So I decided to just play around with the timing a little bit, and if I move it too far that way, then it backfires when it starts to decelerate. If I move it too far that way, then it starts to ping. So this is where the timing has to be, I guess. But it still doesn't make sense why this just dies randomly. I don't know. It ran so much better just by regapping the point, so maybe it's still some ignition related. Maybe there's just a bad connection. Because I don't know. I've never had luck with trying to do this. I've been trying to tune it for over a year now. But I don't know. I'm just going to look around in the distributor. Maybe I'll find something not connecting properly. I'll just clean it all up. It's the next day from that last clip, and I was reading through some forums on these trucks, doing some research, and found someone with similar problems that this has, and they said it was coil related. So I decided to just test the coil. 8.77 ohms. These apparently should be anywhere from 0.4 to 2. So that's a little, has a little more resistance than it should. So that might be the problem. I'm gonna go get a new coil tomorrow and test it out, so hopefully that fixes it. But in the meantime, while I was test driving this, it developed a belt squeal because my belt tensioner can only go so far. So I decided to get a new bolt because this bolt fits perfectly into this adjuster, so I won't have to worry about any sort of bending or play. And I'm going to have to take this entire arm out and file it or make another hole so I can move the tensioner this way. Because it's as far as it can go and I can still move that. So, kind of useless, but I'll be back when either the alternator's back together or I get a new coil. I just managed to get the alternator bracket, pulley, and the bolt out. The pain I had to go through to get that because that bolt hit the water pump. So I had to just take the water pump partially off, which is why there is so much fluid everywhere. Radiator is now empty again, which is fine because it was emptying itself. But I can't believe the bolt was right here. I had to take all of that off so I could push this open so I could shimmy the bolt out. One bolt. That's all it was, just one bolt. But now that that's all out, I have to take this off so I can make this groove go further up into the bracket, just so I can move the belt tensioner further up. So I'll be back when that's all done and back together. I got the alternator bracket filed. As you can see, it used to end like right around here, or yeah, around there, and I just filed a hole, or filed another extra bit of line so that I can fit this bolt through. And I rounded two edges on it. I think these two. so I can slide it in, and I can just slide it all the way over to there, and it's nice and smooth. And to make sure I don't have to go through the pain that I did while taking this out, I cut a bit off of the focus. I cut a bit off of the bolt. Used to be that tall, it's now that tall. That's just so I can get it past the water pump, because it was only being held in by like that much. So now that's all done, I just have to put that back into the engine bay. And that shouldn't take too long now that I've already taken it apart once. And I went to town and got a new coil ordered, so I'll end up getting that tomorrow. But first, I gotta do what I can do. Everything is back together now. The belt is quite a bit tighter than it was before. If I can't really get a good camera angle on that. It used to move a lot more than what it is right now, so that's good. Belt tensioner feels good. And it clears the fan by more than I was expecting, so that's all nice. And I have to get this ready to drive tomorrow, even with no coil, or with no new coil, because my other car is about one warning light away from just stopping completely. So I'm gonna do just a quick little tune job on it because I messed with the carburetor a bit too much. And I'm also gonna put some new coolant in just to run it so it's all full up and good. So I'll be back when I'll probably be back tomorrow when I get the coil. The new coil is in. Looks pretty well the same. That's the old one. I took both of them out. And I swapped over the tabs that used to be on this one. I just put them on this, just to make things a little bit easier. And they look identical, except this one looks about half a century newer. And hopefully it's going to work pretty good. I have a feeling I'm going to have to retune everything, but it's so void without one now. And while I was taking this off, the original screw that was on this was a bit too short, so I ended up just finding this one's about like 1/4 of an inch longer. So that should all work, and I'm just going to throw that all back on. I'll be back. Now that everything's back together, I'm ready to fire it up again. Sure, see what it sounds like. Starts a lot faster. Sounds more or less the same, maybe a little smoother. Also, it does feel a lot smoother. I don't feel nearly as many vibrations, or shaking, or misfires, or whatever you want to call it. It's also extremely hot. I wonder what the RPM gauge says. It's idling at 800 RPM now, which is a change because before that new coil, it used to idle at 750. Well, around there, but it's gone up a little bit, so that's something. It's a change. So I think the next step for what I'm going to do is, first of all, turn that off so you can hear me. And I think I'm going to just let it run for a little bit and tune up the carburetor a little more, because I had it set where it would run best with the old coil, which didn't work that well. So now with the new one, I think it'll run quite a bit better if I just put some time into it. So I'll be back whenever I have something to show. I think it's running quite a bit better. If I turn the key, look at the RPM gauge as it comes up a little bit. It's at 7,500 RPM, which is where it's supposed to idle, as per, I think, what that says. Oh, never mind, 700 RPM. Well, I'll get that one day, I'm sure. I thought it said 750, but it was something else. Anyway, it's running quite a bit better now. Sounds a little Sounds a little more inconsistent, but feeling the throttle, it feels substantially better. Usually just doing that, the engine would start rolling over itself and it would try and die. But now, it is way better. So, I think next I'm just gonna try and sort out that valve tap. It's a few days later, and I just got back home, so now the engine is nice and hot, meaning it's all ready to have the valves readjusted. So, first thing I have to do is take off the valve, well, take all of the bolts out of the valve cover very carefully because I don't want to strip anything or ruin the gasket that goes underneath. So, I'll be back when I get that off. The valve cover is off. I have it relocate over to the other side of the garage. Inside is interesting. Never really seen the inside of an oil cover before, especially to a car. So it's kind of cool to see. It smells terrible. It smells like burning oil still. But that's fine. Now I can go over to the engine. And this is the majestic Datsun engine. Overhead cam. It's quite a lot to look at here. Chain, everything looks good. I don't see any scratches on the lobes or anything. So all of that should be pretty good. Because there was only one valve tapping in this, so I just have to find out which one it is and hopefully just readjust it and be on my way. So just gonna play around with this for a while and see if I can find it, and I'll bring you back when I do. I think the culprit is either this valve or this one over here, because they both have like signs of very, very little wear on these parts, while all the other ones have perfectly clear signs of being actually rubbed on. But I can't really do anything right now because the engine is so small and it's so cold where I live. In the time it took me to get the valve cover off and like find what valve is not to specification, the engine isn't even warm to the touch anymore. Like doing this, there's no more warmth than me touching a rock outside. So the book does specify what it's supposed to be, or what the specifications for the valves are supposed to be when it's hot and cold. This one is intake and this one is exhaust. But it's only cold or hot, and right now it's kind of lukewarm. So I'm going to have to wait until quite a bit later. It's about 5 o'clock right now, so I think I'll come back out at 9 and see if it's cold enough. Because then I can actually gap it to the right stuff. And it's not going to hurt to check them all too, or even just re-gap them all when it's cold. It'll just help it out later on. So I'll be back whenever it's, well, 9. It's about 8:30 right now. And I just got all of the intake valves done. So this one, and these two are all good. There is nothing wrong with them. They are all in the tolerance that the book describes for when it's cold. 0.008 inches. 800, I don't even know what you call it. 800th of an inch maybe. Anyway, so now that the intake ones are done, I have to go around check the exhaust ones. And the book says that they take 10 or 100. Yeah, whatever. I'll figure it out. So now I just have to do that, and I'll be back when that's done. I just finished tuning all of the valves. I went over each one of them and set them to the proper specifications. It only took about an hour. First I had to figure out how the little system there works to tighten them. Once I figured out how that worked, then I had to go over each and every one of them, which was stuck. And to top that off, every time I turned one nut, the one on top either loosened or tightened, which made no sense. And the way it worked was the top nut, if I tightened it, it made the thing looser, but if I tightened the bottom one, it would also tighten the top one, which in turn made everything tighter. So it was a little bit of a learning curve to get over, but by the last valve I kind of figured something out. So it's all fine and done. I didn't see anything all too wrong. All the exhaust valves were really loose, and I think this valve right here was so tight I couldn't get any gauge into it. So that might have been some other issue, but it was not the valve tap. But I think I'm ready to just put it all back together. I had to take the battery out too. I didn't have enough room because this was the only wrench I could get on the bottom nut. And it hit the battery every time I tried to tighten or loosen it. So now once I just have to put everything back together, the valve cover and battery and air filter back on, I should be good. Now that everything's back together, I think it's time for one final startup just to see how well it runs. It's idling a lot higher because the choke is on. I was playing around with it earlier and re-engaged it by accident, so it'll turn off once it gets hot. I also still hear that valve tap. Which I'm now wondering if that's actually the fuel pump. I kind of doubt it, but maybe. Idle it down a little bit. Yeah. It still has a dead spot. I don't know what that's caused by, but for now, I think it's running a lot better. It's running a little better than it used to, but it still has problems. And I'm hoping I'll be able to solve all of these problems, but I don't know. Because I still have radiator still leaks, and I've only been working on engines for I think almost 3 years now. So really to accomplish this is quite an accomplishment for me. And who knows, maybe I'll figure this out by next year, next decade. Hard to say. But for now, hope you enjoyed the video. See you in the next one.